بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه الطاهرين ما دام ما في السماوات والأرضين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم إنا نسألك علما ينفعنا ارفعنا. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا واسعا وعملا متقبلا وشفاء من كل داء وبعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, we thank and praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all of His blessings that He has bestowed upon us. وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. If you endeavor to count the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will not be able to do so. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all of those blessings, the material blessings and the other blessings, and particularly the other blessings, which are the spiritual blessings, the blessings of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, and every other religious blessing related to it, which is a blessing that we find ourselves in right now. And it is the blessings of coming to a gathering whereby we seek to acquire such knowledge that guides us to and guides us along the straight path. Yesterday, we had looked at the issue of issuing a divorce, and it is considered to be reprehensible if there is no need. And we went into some detail in that particular regard. We had read the issue of وَالثَّلَاثُ أَشَدْ, and to issue 3 divorces is more reprehensible. And we will look into the discussion provided by Sheikh Taha ibn Abdul Hamid ibn Muhammad Hamadi in his explanation of Alfaz Umdat al-Salik wa Uddat al-Nasik, and his book is called Fathul Wahab al-Malik. يقول نفعنا الله بكم آمين والثلاث أشد كراهة. So to issue 3 divorces is considered to be more severe in terms of its reprehensiveness. Now, وجمعها في طهر واحد أشد. And for a person to issue 3 divorces in one clean period is considered to be more reprehensible. Now, why is that? Firstly, وَلَا حُرْمَةَ فِي شَيْءٍ مِّن ذَلِكَ. It is not considered to be impermissible. In other words, haram. Yesterday we had discussed the 5 rulings, and the first ruling we discussed was haram. What does haram mean? Can you think of a haram act? Zina. That's normally the first example that people think of. Even when we were in Zakaria, so we in the Hifz section. So none of the Hifz students understand Arabic, but they would walk around and say, "Wala taqrabu zina," and if feigning, a great understanding. So correct, zina. So zina is haram. What does it mean? When we say zina is haram, and zina translates as adultery or fornication. If you're married, it's referred to as adultery. If you're not married, it's referred to as fornication. We agree it is haram. But what is meant when you say something is haram? Not permissible? Yeah, but it's a synonym, not permissible, haram. It's a translation, not permissible. When you say not permissible, what do you mean? Not permissible, not allowed, Now I'm asking just to get us thinking and also get us, involved in the class. Now, haram is ma yuthabu ala tarkihi. You will be rewarded for staying away from it. In other words, it's omittance. If you don't do it, you'll get rewarded. However, if you do it, and then you'll get punished. So think about zina. Zina is haram. What is meant by haram? Haram means that if you do it, you'll be punished. If you stay away from it, you'll be rewarded. You can think of any of the other vices. For example, drinking wine is haram. What does haram mean? Haram means that you will be rewarded for its omittance and you'll be punished for its commission. If you do it, you'll get punished. If you leave it, and then you'll get rewarded. So having understood the concept of what haram means, we now come to what the author says. So now that you understand what haram means, you also understand the weight when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا تقولوا لما تصف ألسنتكم الكذب هذا حلال وهذا حرام لتفتروا على الله الكذب. We shouldn't be quick to say this is halal and this is haram, lest we fabricate a lie against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you label something as haram, what are you doing? You saying that Allah is saying, if you do it, you're going to get punished. And if you omit it, and then you'll get rewarded. So it's quite a grave thing to attach a label of hurma, of impermissibility, to something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't attached that particular label. Okay. So now we come to talaq. We're saying that for a person to give 3 divorces is reprehensible. Don't give 3. It suffices you to give 1. Number 1. Number 2 is, in one clean period, a person in one clean period, so let's say a clean period, the minimum would be 15 days. A lady minimally is clean for a period of 15 days. In that 15-day period, the husband divorces her. Let's say every 5 days he issues her with a divorce. What are we saying? It is reprehensible. Quite severe in terms of it being reprehensible. But we're not saying it's haram. The author and our madhab doesn't say it's haram. It says it is reprehensible, which is very important to appreciate. So, وَلَا حُرْمَةَ فِي شَيْءٍ مِّن ذَلِكَ. So the author makes it a point of saying the ruling is a ruling of reprehensiveness, not a ruling of impermissibility. So if somebody does it, we can't accuse him of doing something which is haram. Now that you've understood the weight of haram, in this particular instance, you can't accuse a person, according to our madhab, of doing something which is haram, and Allah knows best. ثُمَّ الْمُسْتَحَبْ. Then it is recommended, if a person ultimately is going to divorce his wife, then there's a recommended manner, as we will come to learn, in terms of issuing a divorce. This person, he is, for lack of a better expression, he's hell-bent. He made a resolution. I'm going to divorce my wife, and I'm going to divorce her thrice. So he's already taken this resolution. So we're going to tell him now that if it is that you have to give 3 divorces, then at the very least, do it in this particular manner. Now, تفريقها على الأقراء لذات الأقراء. So if we're going to tell him, you want to divorce your wife, right? So, and you want to give her 3 divorces also. It is recommended for you that you divorce her once in the one clean period. You wait for her to go into her menses. In the next clean period, you give another divorce. And the next clean period, you give another divorce. In other words, you divide it over the clean periods, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. ثم المستحب لمريد الثلاث تفريقها على الأقراء لذات الأقراء. That a person who is going to give 3 divorces, that he divides the divorces into the clean periods. Now, وَالْأَشْهُرُ لِغَيْرِهَا. What happens if a lady doesn't experience her menses and then she works according to the months? So then what is he going to do is, he's going to give her a divorce in the 1 month and wait for the next month, give another divorce, and wait for the following month and give her another divorce. Why? لِيَتَمَكَّنْ مِنَ الرَّجَعَةِ. There are a number of wisdoms behind that. The first and most apparent wisdom would be, if he's going to divorce her thrice in one go, أَنْتِ طَالِقٌ ثَلَاثًا, you are divorced thrice, then she's irrevocably divorced. So we're going to say to him that if you want to give 3 divorces, then give 1 divorce first. Why? Because if you regret, then you can still take your wife back if you're still in the waiting period. If the waiting period has expired, then you can still take her back by remarrying her and repaying the bride money. Now, so in other words, you might be hell-bent on doing that now, but your divorce might be met with an instant relief, but with long-term regret. So if you give 1 divorce, and now you're divorced. Now, once you find yourself that you are divorced, you realize, subhanAllah, what is not what was. In other words, you thought it's going to be in a particular way, but it's quite the contrary. Therefore, some of our local scholars also, when they advise 2 people they want to get divorced, but it's actually not a good idea for them to get divorced. They can resolve the issues. So what do they say? Don't issue a divorce. Just separate. Live separately. Because in living separately, though you are still married, you get an experience of what it means to be without each other. So if you can't live separately, and inevitably you're going to come back together, then you could have resolved the whole issue without even issuing a single divorce, just by separately spacing the togetherness. Now, ليتمكن من الرجعة أو التجديد إن ندم وخروجا من خلاف من يحرم جمع الثلاث. So there are three reasons that the authors mention why you shouldn't give three in one go. You can retract your wife, number one, or you can remarry her without her having to remarry somebody else if you just issued the one divorce and the waiting period has expired. And the third is, and a very important consideration is khuruj min al-khilaf. Because there are certain scholars, we don't consider giving 3 divorces once off as haram. But there are scholars who actually do consider it to be haram. So in this particular instance, khurujan al-khilaf. Yeah. So it may not be haram in our madhab, but it is haram according to another madhab. So it's best for you to do something that is you clear according to all the madhahib. And Allah knows best. نعم. والحاصل أن الطلاق تعتري الأحكام الخمسة. So the last part of this particular discussion talks about the 5 legal rulings which apply now to talaq, something which we mentioned at the beginning. And I think just for our own purposes in terms of learning and teaching, to familiarize ourselves as students of Deen and also, seekers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and wanting to lead our lives according to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think it's very important that we are familiar with what the 5 rulings are. Any given thing, at any given time, at least one of the 5 rulings is going to apply. So we said the first one was haram. And then the polar opposite of that would be wajib. Then something can be sunnah, which is recommended. And then the opposite of that would be makruh. And in the middle, we find a category referred to as mubah, in other words, religiously neutral. So the scholars explain here that the concept of talaq is a relative concept. In other words, in certain instances, it's haram for you to give a talaq. In certain instances, it's wajib, compulsory for you to give a talaq. In certain instances, it is sunnah, recommended for you to give a talaq. In certain instances, it is makruh for you to give a talaq. And in other instances, the sharia is simply indifferent to you giving a talaq or not giving a talaq. So it's interesting that the scholars actually mention these 5 rulings in this particular regard. The first one would be that a person enters into an ila arrangement with his wife. So it's an ila arrangement, for lack of a better term. He says that I'm not going to sleep with you for either 4 months or anything more than 4 months. If a person simply doesn't sleep with his wife for that period of time, then there's no problem, the marriage still remains intact. But now if he formally says to her that I'm not going to sleep with you for 4 months, then that is referred to as an ila arrangement. So after the elapse of 4 months, we're either going to tell him, either you're going to divorce your wife, or you're going to live as a married couple should be living and have conjugal relations. You follow me? So now it comes to a point where the 4 months has elapsed and he refuses to divorce her. What is the ruling of him divorcing her now? It becomes wajib. So he said, I'm not going to sleep with you for 4 months. He doesn't intend to have intercourse with her now. So it becomes compulsory upon him to issue the divorce. So that's an example of where it is compulsory to issue a divorce. Then mandub, where it is recommended, and this is what we spoke about in yesterday's lesson, instances, for example, where the husband is apprehensive, that is unable, or he knows that he is unable to fulfill his wife's rights. One of her rights are the rights to maintenance. He's unable to fulfill those particular rights. In that instance, it is recommended for him to divorce his wife. كَأَيَّعْجِزَ عَنِ الْقِيَامِ بِحُقُوقِهَا. He's unable to fulfill his rights, or her rights rather. وَلَوْ لِعَدَمِ الْمَيْلِ إِلَيْهَا. Even as a result of him having a complete disinclination towards his wife. This person has a complete disinclination towards his wife. And as a result of that, he apprehends that he's not going to be fulfilling her rights. Then in that particular instance, it is recommended. أو تكون غير عفيفة ما لم يخشى الفجور بها أو سيئة الخلق بحيث لا يصبر على عشرتها عادة. Or it may be that he's married to a lady and the lady's character is lacking. It could very well be that the male's character is lacking, but we're not talking about that particular perspective. The male could be the problem, it could be the solution. The female can be the problem, can be the solution. But right now we're talking about divorce, which emanates from the husband's side. So if he finds that his wife is lacking in terms of character, and all of us have certain discrepancies when it comes to our character. عسى أن تكرهوا شيئا خير وعسى أن تحبوا شيئا وعاشروهن بالمعروف فإن كرهتموهن فعسى أن تكرهوا شيئا ويجعل الله فيه خيرا كثيرا. It may be that you see a certain quality within your wife and it's not a good quality. But when you look at your wife, you mustn't look at her only in the lens of the one quality. Because in terms of the Quranic verse, there are many other qualities that outweigh this particular negative quality that you are looking at. Because Allah says, perhaps you will dislike something because of the one quality that you are focusing on. And Allah SWT has placed a lot of goodness in that. In other words, there's so many other qualities that if you only looked, you'll realize that in light of all the positive qualities that your wife has, then this negative quality is of no consequence. It actually becomes negligible. Are you with me? But unfortunately, it's the real dynamic in terms of the human condition. The human condition, and that is if I have a white page in front of me, and I put a black dot there, and I ask you what's on the page, then naturally, because of the human condition, it's not a trick question. You're going to tell me there's a black dot. But this particular example highlights also our nature, that when we look at others, then we are blind to the positives and we only focus on the negative. It is a human condition. So Allah SWT is highlighting that here. That if it is that you find that there's a lowly quality within your wife, then don't focus on that lowly quality. Like she has lowly qualities, you also have a lowly quality. But look at the positive qualities and you'll find that the positive qualities outweigh the negative qualities. Tamam? But if it is, so we come to our point now, if it is that the husband finds that she has certain qualities, let's say, for example, every second word is a swear word. You know, I saw now earlier on, I was looking at something. So he's an elderly gentleman and his elderly wife, you know, and the elderly gentleman says to the wife that, you know, for the past 30 years of our marriage, you've always been pointing out all of my faults. And she tells him, 31 years. 31 years. So now, let's say the husband is saying that, you know, every second word is, I've had enough now. Every second word is an expletive, you know, and I can't, you really can't. You should have patience. But he says, no, I really can't. So in this particular instance where the husband feels, as a result of certain qualities that my wife might have, that I'm unable to, you know, I'm unable to manage in this particular situation. And then in that situation, it is recommended for him that the better option would be for you to part ways. We're just explaining, obviously you need to understand the paradigm that at-talaq abghadul halal ila Allah. It's the most disliked to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but there are certain instances where certain rulings apply. If you're unable to make it together, and then it is best actually recommended that you actually move apart. Now, the next one would be haram, where it's completely impermissible, but yet it rather talks to the mode of issuing the divorce. So we will discuss now, inshallah, in detail, that there are three types of divorces. In other words, three modes, modalities in terms of the way you issue a divorce. The one is referred to as talaq bid'i muharram. It is impermissible mode. And then sunni, talaq sunni, which is the recommended mode. And then talaq ghayr sunni wala bid'i, the third category, which doesn't find a place in either of the two first categories. So a talaq bid'i muharram is when a person divorces his wife while she's in the menses, or in a clean period in which he had had intercourse with her. So for him to divorce his wife in those instances is considered to be haram. So that example is very clear. And then makruh, we spoke about makruh at length, that there's no real need to issue a divorce willy-nilly. The husband, almost like the example we gave yesterday of khawla and a husband. That there was no real need to issue the divorce, but he gave the divorce, and it is makruh in that particular regard. And then the example of mubah, which inshallah we won't get into too much. But we'll continue reading the other part of the text now, bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ثم الطلاق على أقسام. So we're going to talk now about the manners and the modes of issuing a divorce. ثم الطلاق على أقسام. There are three types. سني. Here doesn't mean sunnah in the conventional way that you and I are used to. Because when we say sunnah, what do we mean by sunnah? For example, the siwak, miswak is a sunnah. What do we mean thereby? That if you use the toothstick, then you're going to be rewarded for it. If you omit it, if you don't use it, you're not going to be punished for it. So Sunni doesn't mean that here. Here Sunni means the recommended manner and mode of issuing a divorce. If you want to give a divorce, then there's a right way of doing it, and then there's a wrong way of doing it, a correct way and incorrect way. So Sunni is the correct way. Then secondly, وَبِدِعِ muharram. The word bid'i normally we translate as an innovative, but here having a negative connotation attached to it, muharram, which is impermissible. And we gave you two examples now. And then the last one would be khalin an sunnah wal bid'ah, that a divorce which is neither in the first category nor in the second category. فَأَمَّا السُنِّيُّ. So we go into the first category immediately. What does it talk about? It says, أَن يُطَلِّقَ, for a husband to divorce his wife, فِي طُهُرٍ, in a clean period. So this is the recommended way. Let's say a husband and wife had a fallout, and she's currently in a menses. She's currently bleeding. Then the husband wants to issue a divorce. We're going to say, whoa, you want to issue a divorce? We're first going to discourage him from not divorcing. But if it is that you have to give the divorce, then give the divorce in the proper manner. What is the proper manner? You wait for the menses to come to an end, wait for her to enter into a clean period, and when she's in a clean period and you haven't had intercourse with her, then you issue the divorce. That is the right way and correct way of issuing the divorce. Tamam? We can also understand now, we spoke about, like in Cape Town, we have this culture that if the husband wants to divorce his wife, what does he do? He contacts the imam first. So this would be another reason why you should contact the imam, because the imam is going to facilitate that. If it is that you want to give the divorce, at the very least, then give the divorce in the Sunni manner, in the proper manner. And it's not something that you come across every day. So the proper education will be facilitated by the imam. أَيُطَلِّقَ فِي طُهْرٍ لَمْ يُجَامِعْ فِيهِ. So the Sunni talaq is for him to divorce her in a clean period in which he did not have intercourse with her. Now, so I think inshallah today we can suffice ourselves with that part, and we can read through the explanatory notes in that regard, and we can conclude our reading of Fathul Wahhab inshallah bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, فَأَمَّا السُنِّي. As for the recommended way, أي الجائز الموافق للسنة. So the author explains to us very nicely now what is meant by Sunni. In other words, the permissible way which accords to the Sunnah. In other words, this is the way that you should give it. In other words, the Prophet ﷺ, he would issue his divorce like this. Remember, he divorced Hafsa and he took her back. Abdullah ibn Umar, we're going to see now, he divorced his wife when she was in the menses. The Prophet ﷺ took exception to that and told him, take your wife back. So in other words, if you want to divorce your wife in the proper manner, then this is the proper manner of doing it. And here you come to understand where that whole idea of Allah consciousness comes through, mentioned more than 5 times in Surah Al-Talaq. You want to give the divorce, you give the divorce properly as you should give the divorce. Are you with me? And at times like this, when you're emotionally unstable, then it is even more important for us to anchor ourselves to Allah consciousness and doing what Allah wants us to do and staying away from His prohibition. That's our anchor. That's our anchor. And taqwa, if you wanted to translate it in our nomenclature, modern nomenclature, in our current way of speaking, it's emotional intelligence. You have to be emotionally intelligent when it comes to these things. I read a very interesting thing about emotional intelligence. Not about emotional intelligence, but emotion just in general. A judge shouldn't be passing judgment when he's angry. In other words, he's angry. So in other words, that emotion is going to cloud his judgment. So now the scholars say, what if his anger is for justified reason? In other words, you can become angry because of your own ego, but you can become angry for the sake of Allah. A law of Allah is being violated and you become angry. So what if the judge is angry? Like, a case comes and this case is so disturbing that the judge becomes angry. But why is he becoming angry? For the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Can he issue a ruling whilst he is angry, but angry for the sake of Allah? even then our scholars say that he shouldn't pass judgment. Because it doesn't matter whether you're angry for the sake of Allah or you're angry for another reason, you're still angry, which is an emotion which may cloud your judgment. And therefore you're not going to be balanced in terms of the verdict that you're going to be giving. So it's very important highlighting the fact that emotion, which all of us will be sit with, and that's part of our challenge. And in most instances, we must watch our emotion, watch our ego. We must put a bridle on there. It's very animalistic, and therefore it needs to be bridled and reined in when required. No. So again, the importance of having Allah consciousness in all of our affairs. When we get married, if it comes to a point where, and perhaps to give another perspective to things, and we can look at marriage, but I'll give you an extraneous example to help us understand. After Asr, we prayed for the two ladies. Allah SWT grant them complete cure. Now, for us, the felicity of a illness and a sickness is to be cured from that sickness and ailment, isn't it? I'm sick. For lack of a better word, success. A successful outcome of my sickness is I'm cured of my sickness. That's our understanding. But it's not necessarily so. Because inevitably what's going to happen is that you're going to fall sick and you're not going to be cured, but the sickness is going to lead to your death. So was that an unsuccessful outcome of your sickness? You're going to fall ill. That illness is going to lead to your death. That illness lead to your death. Is it an unsuccessful outcome of your illness? No. So it means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitated for you timely death. So what then is the successful outcome of an illness? Successful outcome of an illness is that in the illness, we turn to Allah. If in your illness, whether you are cured or whether you succumb to the illness and pass away, the success of the illness is that in the illness you turn to Allah. And we ask ourselves that, in illness, in this dire state, if I can't turn to Allah, then when am I going to turn to Allah? So understanding that from that perspective, is very important for us to understand the perspectives. From that perspective, allow me to give the example of marriage. The success of a marriage is for you to remain married? Or is the success of a marriage that in your marriage you fulfill the law of Allah and you stay away from His prohibitions, irrespective of what the outcome may be? You can't determine the outcome. You follow? The success of a marriage. So in other words, let's say hypothetically a person gets married and they stick to the law of Allah SWT. And then, but they can't move from the I culture to the we culture, they're just not compatible. And they move apart. But they move apart also according to the law of Allah SWT. The husband ultimately issues a divorce, there's a Sunni divorce. And that marriage, how are we going to look at it? From this perspective, we're going to consider that marriage to be a success. Why? Because throughout, they fulfill the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So success for us in any endeavor, where passes or fails, the success of there would be that had I implemented the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or did I not implement the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? If I implemented the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I was successful in my endeavor. If I did not, you have a business venture and you implemented the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the business venture proves not to be profitable. From a sense of not being profitable, it's a failure. But from the more important perspective in terms of fulfilling the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is a success. Now, Allah grant us the understanding. والتسمية بسنة اصطلاحية ليس فيها منسوب ومنسوب إليه وكذا البدعي فهو أن يطلق في طهر لم يجامع فيه ولا في حيض قبله. So another interesting point which they mention about in order for you to give divorce in the proper manner, it would mean that you give a divorce in a clean period in which you have not had intercourse with your wife, Why? Because if you had intercourse with her, it means there's a possibility of a child, and then you would come to regret later, issuing the divorce. But now what happens is the person issues the divorce in the clean period, but he had intercourse with his wife in the preceding menses, which he shouldn't do. It's not permissible, but he did anyway. So if it is that a person had intercourse with his wife in the menses, and then when it comes to the clean period now wants to divorce her, we're going to say, no, you have to wait for another menses, another clean period, because you need to give a divorce in a clean period, if you follow. Not a clean period in which the preceding menses before that you had intercourse with her. And in the narration of Abdullah ibn Umar is mentioned, and we can read through that tomorrow bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala wa jazakumullahu khair al-jaza. تفضلوا. وعليكم السلام مرحبا. How to avoid divorce in its entirety. Yeah. Yes, there's a one-word answer for it. And the one-word answer is ihsan. Ihsan means to create beauty. When you get married, you realize that your partner is there to complement you. And if you're able to complement your partner and your partner is able to complement you, then you become a manifestation of beauty. And that is the highest level that you can reach in as far as spirituality is concerned. So how do you do that? When you come into a marriage, you have rights and you have obligations. Yesterday, very interestingly, in the last part of our class, we had spoken about two concepts. One is fard and one is sunnah. Which is more important? We said fard by far is more important. When you come into a marriage, you have rights and then you have obligations. For you to forego your right is recommended. To you to fulfill your obligation is compulsory. What is more rewarding? Doing that which is compulsory, that which is recommended? That which is compulsory. So when you come into a marriage, the idea is to develop ihsan, whereby you compliment your spouse compliments you. No? Secondly, your frame of mind is not my rights, but to fulfill your obligations. Marriage is like a box. In order for the marriage to work, you must keep the box full. How do you keep the box full? Contributing to the box with acts of kindness, acts of compassion, acts of love, acts of sincerity. And if you keep that box full, inshallah, the talaq, divorce, will never ever feature. You will not think about it because of the beauty which is created within that union. Your wife will not think about it because of the beauty which is created within that union. And inna Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim. Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change the condition themselves. So once you start taking too much away from the box, when you start not contributing towards the box becomes empty, and that's where talaq and divorce may feature. And it's important, particularly for us men, and when you talk about and focus on marriage, is very important. I personally believe that if a marriage breaks down, it's the husband's fault, and you must take that responsibility. And if it's the wife's fault, it's because the husband allowed it to be the problem. Yeah. And then it's a very beautiful, if we look about the union, what should the union be? We're talking now to that when one is inclined to the other one. So it is said that a lady is created or has been created from the crooked rib of Adam. My understanding is that is established in an authentic narration. From the bend rib, or the rib that's crooked or inclined. So why is that? It's because you find a lady by her very nature is always inclined to others. Your wife, she was a daughter, and in that particular household, she was always inclined towards her father, inclined towards her mother, and inclined to the house. She's always inclined towards others, giving others preference over herself. When she gets married, Now she's in the marriage. Now she's still inclined because she's created from that rib that inclines. She now inclines towards the husband, to the service of husband, and so forth. So that's what a lady naturally brings to the marriage. What do you bring? So then some of our scholars say that if she's a crooked rib, then you must become a lung. So, we likened her to like a body part, which is a crooked rib, or the rib that inclines. So what must you become? You must become that lung. What does the lung do? Adam and Hawa. So Hawa was created from that crooked rib, inclined rib. So she inclined towards Adam. She was inclined. And her name was Hawa. Like in a roundabout way, Hawa can also mean fragrance. So what do you need? When that crooked rib or inclined rib inclines towards you, you need a bigger lung in order for you to inhale that fragrance. And that crooked rib that's always inclined towards you, to be able to adopt it and make it part of you, so that you become in a whole. And through becoming a whole, you work and you move like that towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The idea behind getting married to a degree, or to a large degree, and the ultimate purpose of it is that when you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, then you can only gain such closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a union, as two, and that is the idea behind marriage, that physically and in all other ways you complement each other to such a way that it actually becomes a format and a basis for you as husband and wife to, in union, gain proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the idea behind marriage. So, makes sense? Allah grant us tawfiq. Easier said than done. Any other questions? No. I many times feel that, sometimes, like for example, the points mentioned, not because I'm mentioning it, but this is what our scholars mentioned. Knowledge is something that you must, what do you call that? You need to absorb, and it must. So sometimes, when a point is mentioned, you feel that the class must be concluded on that point. Because there's just so much to think about, man, for all of us. I don't know if you want to conclude the class on that point. The ball is in your court. But sometimes you just need to think about things, man. Follow on. Salam. In order for the divorce to fall, does witnesses need to be present? No. It's not a condition that witnesses be present in order for the divorce to fall. And I speak under correction, but I think this is another misconception. People will come and the lady will say to you, my husband divorced me thrice, but there were no witnesses. So, they're wanting to get back together again, man. So now they're looking for an issue that will basically render the divorce null and void. So the fact that there's witnesses or no witnesses is no consequence. The moment a person issues a divorce, and then the divorce falls. People sometimes want to, because maybe the husband is going to say something else, and then we're going to have to take their word and so forth. So sometimes they call witnesses so that you can be witness that this actually transpired. But it's not a requirement as such for the divorce to fall. No. Follow. No. So the question is, if as a person he says to his wife that I'm not going to have conjugal relations with you for 4 months or more, the period elapses. He has no intention of having intercourse with her. The ruling clearly states that it's compulsory for him to divorce her. But now what happens is he doesn't want to divorce her. They want to divorce her. So here the scholars they have like two approaches. The one is that some scholars say that the judge can coerce him to divorce his wife. So they didn't mention it in the examples of the coercion. There we went into the guy gets married to 4 wives and gets married to a 5th one and so forth. But some mention this as an example whereby he can be coerced. Others say no, it's not an example of coercion. I speak under correction, it will come. That he doesn't coerce, the judge doesn't coerce the husband to divorce the wife, but the judge actually has a right to issue the divorce. But that, I must just verify that last one, inshallah. So that's how they would, in other words, if that's the case, then she doesn't have to apply for a fasakh, annulment of the marriage. She will basically go to the judiciary and she will raise the matter with the judge. And according to the first one, the judge will either force him to divorce or he will enact the divorce from his side. But the last solution I will have to just look at, inshallah. Barakallah fiqh. So inshallah we read some of the mukhtarat and then we can conclude, inshallah. Is everybody okay with that? Bismillah. Alhamdulillah. I must say I'm very astounded. You people look very interested. Is something I'm doing wrong or something? Bismillah. So these are the letters of Imam As-Sarindi rahimahullah from من كتاب المختارات من مكتوبات الإمام الرباني السرهندي بقلم العلامة شيخ محمد أمين آر إلى أن قال. So we spoke about him writing to one of his disciples, and the very important point which he established was that you have fard and you have sunnah. It should never be that you do something recommended at the cost of something which is fard. And in their particular instance, what were they doing? They were delaying the Isha prayer right up until the end. And the reason they did that was to force them to remain awake for the whole night. Because they tell themselves, look, I must still make my Isha, so there's no way I can sleep. And this basically keeps them awake for the whole night, so they make nafil ibadat, and then they make Isha at the end. He's saying this is unacceptable. Why? Because this is a fard act, and you're delaying a fard act from its time. No matter what recommended things you do for the whole of the night, right, you're not going to get as much as reward as you would have had you simply performed the Isha on its time. Now, so he says, فَارْتِكَابُ هَذَا الْأَمْرِ. So to do this, لِأَجْلِ قِيَامِ اللَّيْلِ, in order to have قِيَامُ اللَّيْل, in order to stay up in the night. وَحُصُولِ الْأَذْوَاقِ وَالْجَمْعِيَّةِ فِي ذَلِكَ الْوَقْتِ. In order for you to experience different experiences. In other words, he says, ذوق means taste. So you can have different spiritual experiences. He says, مُسْتَقْرَوٌ جِدًّا. It is severely, severely, severely reprehensible. You shouldn't be doing that at all. And then he says, if you really thought about it, and remember now, just put yourself in a Hanafi position. According to our madhab, performing witr is sunnah. But according to the Hanafi madhab, to perform witr is wajib. So he's saying that, why do you have to delay the Isha in order to keep awake? You can simply just delay your witr. So witr is also wajib. Isha is fard. Witr is wajib, according to the Hanafi madhab. So you don't perform your witr, and then you remain awake whole night because you tell yourself, I still have to make my witr, as opposed to telling yourself, I still have to make my Isha. So he says, so in other words, if you really thought about it and you had better knowledge, then you wouldn't have to compromise your fard act in order to do what you are doing. Look, if a person now, he performs his Isha on time, he doesn't perform his witr, and he tells himself that I'm not going to make my witr now, because if I make my witr, then I'm going to fall asleep. I'm rather going to delay my witr right at the end, which is recommended, by the way. And then in the interim, I'm going to enliven the night. And then he stands up the whole night, he makes his witr last, and he makes his fajr with jama'ah. Who's going to have a problem with him? That's an ideal situation. But they didn't think about the witr. And that's because when you don't have enough reading in terms of fiqh, and you don't know your fiqh, then it becomes a problem. ويكفي لهذا الغرض تأخير الوتر. You can delay witr, it's better. وأيضا ذلك التأخير مستحب. And that delaying of the witr is furthermore recommended. فيؤدي الوتر في وقت مستحب ويتيسر الغرض من قيام الليل والسهر. So then you perform the witr in its recommended time, and then your objective of staying awake is also achieved while not compromising a fard act of the Sharia. You with me? So you need to be, in order to work, you need to be smart also. And you need to know the nick to do the trick, which means that you need to know the laws of the Sharia. No. فينبغي ترك هذا العمل. So he says it is becoming that you desist from doing this. In other words, from delaying your Isha, because you're delaying a fard act at the cost of for the benefit or your supposed benefit of a sunnah act. No. وقضاء الصلوات الفائتة, and you must make qada of all the salah that you delayed. He's telling his murid now, the disciples, you must make qada of all of those. فإن الإمام الأعظم أبا حنيفة الكوفي رضي الله عنه تعالى قضى صلاة 40 سنة بسبب ترك أدب من أداب الوضوء. He says that you must. So in other words, you want to be a Sufi, he's telling him. So what happens is, you know, the salah, if you look at it technically speaking, the salah that they made just before daybreak, is that salah valid? It's valid. Because Isha time only comes to an end at Fajr time, at daybreak. But he's telling the murids now that all the Ishas that you made at that time, you must make qada of all of them. Why? Because he says it is reported from Imam Abu Hanifa that he made the qada of a salah of 40 years because he missed out one of the adabs of wudu. So you realize that I missed out an adab from the adab of wudu, and then he made qada of that salah. So the ulama, you find it very particular in terms of the acts of worship because it's in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It reminds me of, I speak under correction, but it's in the book See Without Shore of Sheikh Nuham Kala. He talks about his teacher, Sheikh Abdul Wakil, was a Shafi jurist. And I'm like very sure about this, but somebody asked me about it, so it creates a doubt in my mind. But it was Habib Umar who came to visit. So they made salah, and then in the salah, I think it was Dhuhr salah. So then Shaykh Abdul Wakil made sujood sahwi, sajdatul sahwi. So then Habib Umar said, look, there was nothing ostensibly wrong with your salah. How is it that you made a sajdatul sahwi? So he says, no, that in I think it was I don't know if it was the jalsa, istiraha, or the jalsa bayna sajdatain. In one of the sittings, he tarried a bit longer than what he normally does. And according to Imam Abu Hanifa, not according to Imam Shafi, according to Imam Abu Hanifa, that necessitates a sajdatul sahwi, and therefore he made the sajdatul sahwi. So, so how the importance they attach to this. But the important point here, bringing things back to context, would be what? That the Shaykh, Imam Asarindi, tells the disciples that since it came to my attention that you were doing this, it's wrong. You must desist from doing it immediately. And all the salahs that you made that late, you must make qada of all of that salahs. And he cites Imam Abu Hanifa as a proof in this particular regard. This is not Sharia, this is tariqah. If you're saying Sharia, then Sharia says you don't have to. And if somebody argues on the Sharia, you can't argue with him. Because the Sharia doesn't say you must make qada, because all the conditions are met. But this is a sheikh talking to his murid. And this is where tariqah comes in. And we mustn't conflate between Sharia and tariqah. Because when we conflate between Sharia and tariqah, we make problems for ourselves, we make problems for others. Because Sharia is this broad. But tariqah is not as broad as what Sharia is. So then when you take the limited lens of Sharia, of tariqah, and you apply it to Sharia, then you're going to cramp other people's styles, unnecessary to cramp other people's style. But your tariqah is there for a reason. Because the Sharia is a broad road. But we talk about short circuiting. Your Shaykh will give you a tariqah, a road within the road of Sharia, where you come quicker to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's basically tariqah. So there's no contradiction between Sharia and Tariqah. And here we find a manifestation of, because now people will say, but how can the Shaykh say that? No, he's talking Tariqatan. He's saying Tariqatan, not Shari'atan. No. وأيضا قد نقل رجل معتمد أن مريدي بعض خلفائكم يسجدون له ولا يكتفون بتقبيل الأرض. And then also, you see the responsibility of the Shaykh is to make tarbiyah nurturing. So what happens is, I didn't particularly understand this example, but it came to me later. You see, if you want, they call it a kebab. You know what is a kebab? A kebab. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. By kebab could be Nigerian too. Tawbah, 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 tawbah. Astaghfirullah, la hawla wa la quwwata illa. Give this guy a kebab for iftar, please, man. Yeah. You know kebab? Kebab. Now you know a kebab. So now, how do you make a kebab? Huh? No, but where does the kebab come from? How do you have a good kebab? Yes, but before even there, what happens is you first get before the mince even. What do you get the meat? And then the meat must be minced, isn't it? And then that minced meat must be put on the mortar, on the stone mortar. And then you must mince it up nicely, the meat and everything nice. And then you must add all the spices and everything, and you must put it together nicely, and you must, add the bread, add this, whatever the case may be, depending how you make it. You can ask the food basket, they will tell you. Now, you put it like that together. Now, so that is a similitude of a sheikh and the murid. The similitude of a sheikh and a murid is like the meat and the kebab. If you want to process a nice kebab, what are you going to do? You must mince the meat. You must knock it on the mortar. You must push it together like this and rub it out like that and sort it out. Otherwise, it's not going to be a nice kebab. So the sheikh must make sure that his murid is a nice kebab. And you can't leave him just like that. You must make a proper kebab out of him. You understand? If you have a sheikh, and the sheikh, everything you say, mashallah, mashallah, shabash, shabash, shabash. No, it's not the sheikh. Sheikh is like medicine. Advice is like medicine. It's very bitter to swallow. But if you swallow it and you endure the bitterness, what's going to happen? You're going to become cured, isn't it? That's the relationship between a murid and a sheikh. The sheikh is like a doctor. He's give you the medicine. A spiritual doctor. But the kebab example is a nice example. Because, you're looking forward that though I'm being minced, but inshallah I'll become a nice kebab. You follow? Must I re-explain the kebab example, or you understand the kebab example? You got it? You got it? It must be clear for you, man. The idea behind the similitude is for you to understand the example. Otherwise. So Sheikh Imam Sarindi is talking to his disciples. And when he writes a letter to them, he's making his tarbiyah. That's what you're doing is wrong. He's telling them. No. And he says further that Aydan, a reliable person of one of the murids of some of your vicegerents, of your khulafa, has informed me that yasjuduna lahu, that they make sajda for him. They fall prostrate in front of him. وَلَا يَكْتَفُونَ بِتَقْبِيلِ الْأَرْضِ. They don't suffice themselves by, kissing the earth. وشناعة هذا الفعل أظهر من الشمس فامنعوه من ذلك بالتأكيد. So the vileness of this action is more apparent than the sun. In other words, you don't prostrate in front of anybody. You only prostrate in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, فامنعوه من ذلك. So prohibit him from doing that بالتأكيد, with emphasis. فإن الاجتناب من أمثال هذا الفعل مطلوب من كل أحد خصوصا ممن تصدى لاقتداء الخلق به. So to desist from the likes of this action is required from anybody, specifically if a person now is considered to be a spiritual mentor. And now in the spiritual mentor, in his company, the people are bowing and prostrating for him. This shouldn't be. لأن المقلدين يقتدون به في أعماله فيقعون في بلاء وابتلاء, because people are inevitably going to end up following him, so you should desist from doing this. وأيضا إن علوم هذه الطائفة علوم الأحوال. نعم إن شاء الله. So I think we can stop there بإذن الله سبحانه وتعالى. This next point, which is end of this particular letter, is also going to be a very, very important point. And we'll talk about it tomorrow بإذن الله سبحانه وتعالى. And so we'll suffice with this, but inshallah, barakallah fikum wa jazakum Allah khair al-jaza. نقرأ الدعاء بسرعة إن شاء الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربنا انفعنا بما علمتنا. رب علمنا الذي ينفعنا. رب فقهنا وفقه أهلنا وقرابة لنا في ديننا مع أهل القطر أنثى وذكر. ربنا وفقنا ووفقهم لما ترتضي قولا وفعلا كرما وارزق الكل حلالا دائما وأخلا أتقياء علماء نحظى بالخير ونكفى كل شر. ربنا وأصلح لنا كل شؤون وأكد ربي برضا منك العيون واقض عنا ربنا كل ديون قبل أن تأتينا رسل المنون واغفر استر أنت أكرم من ستر. وصلاة الله تغشى المصطفى من إلى الحق دعانا والوفاء بكتاب فيه للناس شفاء وعلى الآل الكرام شرفاء وعلى الصحب المصابيح الغرى. اللهم اهدنا بهداك واجعلنا ممن يسارع في رضاك ولا تولينا وليا سواك ولا تجعلنا ممن خالف أمرك وعصاك. وحسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. يا ربنا اعترفنا بأننا اقترفنا وأننا أسرفنا على لظى أشرفنا فتب علينا توبة تغسل كل حوبة واستر لنا العورات وآمين الروعات واغفر لوالدينا ربي ومولودينا والأهل والإخوان والسائر الخلان وكل ذي محبة أو جيرات أو صحبة والمسلمين أجمع آمين ربي اسمع. فضلا وجودا منا لا باكتساب منا بالمصطفى الرسول نحظى بكل سول. بالمصطفى الرسول نحظى بكل سول. بالمصطفى الرسول نحظى بكل سول. صلى وسلم ربي عليه عد العب وآله وصحبه عداد طش السحب. والحمد للإله في البدء والثناء. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. في كل لحظة أبدا عدد خلقي ورضا نفسي وزنة عرشي ومداد كلماتي. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على آله وصحبه وسلم.